just stampede out of here.
Check for weapons at the door.
Yeah. How about drones?
Is that camera loaded?
So let's start this debate now. And to start off, for the pro side, please welcome Richard Baum.
Fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests. The resolution has been proposed that we privatize the U.S. postal system. I'm taking the side that we should do that, and I'd like to explain my reasoning to you tonight. Any organization can be looked at as being composed of three major components: people, things, and systems. When we look at the U.S. Postal Service, we can dissect it into those three parts and say, what if this were private versus its current state as a part of the federal government? Let's start with people. Currently, the people who work in the federal postal system are government employees. The type of context in which federal employees work has traditionally been one in which people get into the system and stay in it for life. They progress through GS levels, government service levels, and end up retiring with a pension that takes care of them till their final days on the planet. In a private corporation, we see a major difference. People tend to move into a corporation, stay as long as it meets their needs, transfer, sometimes within the same industry, but a different employer, slightly different position in the same industry, different employer. They may change industries altogether. When they retire, they tend to have 401ks or other form of personal retirement system. They don't get a pension the way government employees do. That means that the flow of people is a lot more dynamic in a privatized system than it is in a government system where people tend to stay for life. There are benefits to that type of dynamism and turnover, which means that the changing needs of the company can be addressed as people come and go, and different people who are better suited for the needs of the corporation at a point in time can be positioned to serve the corporation at that time. The second category is things. When we look at the U.S. postal system, things consist of buildings, vehicles, electronic devices that can scan packages, barcodes, and keep track of things. When we look at a system in which things are owned by the federal government, we see some parallels to the type of static nature that we see with people. Things tend to stay the way that they are in the government system. If we look at a privatized system, that privatized system is a very important market for every electronics manufacturer who wants to sell their thing, whether it be a vehicle that's more efficient, a building which charges lower rent, a scanner which has a longer guarantee, demands less energy. The competition aspect causes better things to be put in place. And finally, systems. Let's take a look at the tracking system that the U.S. Postal Service uses. If you look in one of those carrier vehicles, what do you see next to the driver? A paper map. Compare that to some of the privatized mapping systems like Google Earth, Google Maps, FedEx electronic tracking system, and UPS, where you know where an item is every point along the way. That is the result of these different firms competing against each other. When we look at all of these things together, people, things, and systems, there's one thing that makes them different in the federal system above and beyond all these other things that I've touched on so far, and that is how they are all funded. What makes them work? In a privatized system, there will be many carriers who will compete by making their services better and more efficient so that they can earn the money of carrying the mail. In the federal system, where does the USPS get its funding? From the one source. The IRS collects taxes, and those taxes have to be allocated and split up among the U.S. Postal Service, highway system, space exploration, defense, Medicare, Social Security, pensions. If the U.S. Postal System says we need more money, they have to go out and issue more expensive postage stamps, or say to the federal government, we need a bigger slice of the funding, which means that the government has to say, well, that means since we have a fixed income, we either have to raise taxes or take money away from one of these other services. With privatized system, they compete to earn the right to charge to carry the postal system. There are so many advantages to privatizing. There are numerous examples of private systems always working more efficiently than public, static, subsidized systems. We should privatize the U.S. postal system. Mr. Toastmaster.
And now to give a riveting presentation on the con side, Michael Future.
Our economic freedom is under attack. It's being attacked by the relentless push of privatization of public services. The latest attack is now against the U.S. Postal Service, an office that has been successfully performing its job for 200 years. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and our honored guest, allowing corporate control of the post office would be a disaster for the efficient delivery of mail and for the American taxpayer. But I also want to address that larger issue that Richard pointed out with is this relentless push of privatization. Is, first of all, why it would be a bad idea is because taxpayers will be screwed. There's no other way to put it. By outsourcing first-class mail, what will happen will, businesses will keep the most efficient routes, and because postal delivery is constitutionally mandated, they will abandon the least profitable routes, and that would be picked up by the government. So we would be screwed that way. Also, because it's mandated by the Constitution, is they can freely give it up and us taxpayers have to pay for those routes. If you don't believe this happens, go to UPS, the United Parcel Service. I went there, I had to mail a package to New Jersey, and he says, this is going to cost you $27. Why did I go to the post office and for $5 if it fits, it ships? Is why that much? Well, they normally don't deliver to that area. They pick and choose which routes are profitable. So what's going to happen is we're going to have to pick up as taxpayers those routes. The secondly is us taxpayers actually we fund and support corporations. It's not the other way around. Corporations are filled with this. For example, ADT, alarm company. Some of you subscribe to it. I don't. Many of us don't. What happens if they detect an alarm? Do they send their own people out? No, they call the police. And guess what? We all pay for the police. So they use the police as their own private employees, and they don't have to subsidize it and hire their own people to investigate when the alarm trips. Also, when a new business moves into your community, what do the politicians do? We'll give you tax breaks. You won't have to pay property tax for 25 years if you move into our area. Well, what about the businesses that have been there for years, paying their property taxes, supporting the infrastructure? Why do these new businesses get a free ride at our expense? Also, let's look at Walmart. Walmart doesn't pay a living wage. So what happens when their hardworking employees have a sickness in their family? They have to use public service, which we pay for. Because Walmart rather use that money and provide proper, instead of providing proper health benefits, they'd rather let the taxpayers pick it up. And they get more profit. The third thing is public services do make a profit. The U.S. Postal Service generated $1.3 billion last year in revenue. But in an effort to privatize it, and the politicians want to divide it up and give it to their corporate friends, they made a law that they have to publicly support pre-fund their retirement 75 years in advance. 75 years in advance. So they had to cough up $1.4 billion. So on the paper, it shows that they have a loss of $100 million. That's just an effort to destroy it so they can give it to their corporate friends. Also, good jobs will be lost. What is wrong with paying people a livable wage? Postal workers use that money, support their families, support their communities, pay taxes on it. What's wrong with that? Since when did making a livable wage become evil? Also, let's face it, privatization results in poor service. The Simi Library was recently privatized. I was at the council meetings listening to it. The community did not want it. They did it anyway. And as I read in the Ventura Star, it said that I'll quote it, is turning over to this private company based in Maryland will give more local control. I don't get that. How can a corporation that's based 3,000 miles away in Maryland can be local control of our local library? So do we want this same type of lowering of service for First Not Smith? So in conclusion, privatization of public services for profit, will result in increased costs, lower wages, it hurts families and local communities. The United States Postal Service has been successfully delivering mail for 200 years. It is adapting to new technology. It is making changes. But it's a relentless push to divide it and make it purposely fail so it can be privatized for corporate friends that is so destructive. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Michael. You know, employees of the post office like to say, you work hard so we don't have to. So, crickets. So, I'll edit that part out. So, to do a rebuttal on pro side, Richard Bond.
Well, the opponent brings up some very good points. But I would say that there was one missing ingredient, which is the ingredient of competition. That is at the heart of what makes the U.S. economy thrive. Competition and the drive of competitors to be better, to be the best, and to work hard to get into that position and thereby earn business. In the example cited, the company that was based in Maryland took over the running of the library and services were degraded. But what did not happen was that they were held to be accountable to their performance by the threat of losing the contract. If a public operation such as the U.S. Postal Service or the library or lifeguards or whatever are operating under the constraint that if they don't perform, their 2-year contract will expire and they will lose their contract, they will then not do what the example company in Maryland did with the Simi Valley Library. They will be striving to maintain a level of excellence that will allow them to get their contract renewed at the end of 2 years. So it will be with the postal system. We're not totally devoid of competition. If you want to send a package across the country, what options do you have today? You can go to the post office and send it. You can also go to a private carrier and have them send it as well. Which one do you choose? Usually your decision is going to be based on levels of quality and service and trust. That it's going to get there. They're not going to be lost along the way. So right now, the Postal Service does have competition. If we had private versus public, that would be a stimulus to the public to maintain their level of service in a way that they may not currently be challenged to do. Mr. Toastmaster.
To do his rebuttal on the con side, welcome back, Michael Picture.
I'm glad Richard brings up the idea of competition. If there's anything that financial situation we learned in 2008 is there's no such thing as competition. The game is rigged. It's rigged against taxpayers. It's rigged against the common person. It is, as you know, you can drive a company like AIG in the ground and still walk away with your $1 million, billions of dollars actually, golden parachutes, and not be held accountable. Public employees are held accountable. I am a public employee. If I don't do my job, I get fired. Simple as that. Teachers do get fired. And the fact is that, as I pointed out the example with the UPS, is the post office, I could have mailed that package for $5. UPS, $27? There is no competition because, again, the game will be rigged. Is these private companies will keep the profitable route and dump the other ones on the U.S. taxpayer. And it's always the U.S. taxpayer who bails out financial firms, bails out corporations, and they see it degrading as a quality of service. Again, for example, Richard brings up the issue about we can never be fired, we have pensions. Let me tell you, I can't speak for the post office. I see them working hard. I'm friends with my local postal carrier. Is teachers, we don't pay into Social Security. We don't get Social Security. We pay into our own pension, 8.5%. 8.25%. You in the private sector are lucky. You're paying your payroll taxes 3.25% for your Social Security benefits. We don't get that. So this relentless attack on public employees, and what is wrong with a postal employee who enjoys his job, has a relationship with the people on their route, enjoys what they do, is learning? What's wrong with staying in a job for 10 years? When did being a stable employee become evil? People don't get fired because they're incompetent. Otherwise, most CEOs would be out of a job. They get fired because those CEOs look and say, you're making too much money. We can get somebody cheaper to buy. We don't value your skills. And those of you who had the impact of losing jobs, which a lot of people have during the recession, you know what privatization does. It's not fair that you lost your job while all these CEOs get their bailouts. And we still see that going on today. And as I said in history, if you don't learn from history, you're going to repeat it, and it will happen again. So the game is rigged.
I think from our first two speakers, we've all learned that you need to think outside the mailbox. The U.S. Postal Service is losing billions of dollars every year and is looking to make drastic changes. They're really going to have to push the envelope.
Yeah, you really got those jokes linked.
Oh, you did not.
Oh, Michael.
He learned this from your dad.
I made that very clear at the beginning.
That was good.
Well, welcome our next speaker, next two speakers, and speaking on the pro side, BJ Ingham.
Oh, dear.
I'm a financial analyst by training, And as a result, I think money's important. And I believe that what you decide to spend your money on determines what your priorities are and means what kind of a person you are. So I'd like to give you guys a bunch of choices. What do you think our government should spend its money on? Educating children, paying for medical care for the sick, elderly, and infirm, hunting terrorists and the bad people around the world, providing basic services for the poor, subsidizing the cost of a postage stamp because some people don't want to learn how to use the internet. What do you think our priority should be? It's your choice. As you know, Postal Service has alternatives in package delivery. UPS, FedEx provide very similar services. Their pricing schemes may be different, but they can readily take the place of the Postal Service in package delivery today if we need it to be. We have to look at postage not as a social service, which it was historically before the invention of the internet, but as a business. It's something that the service that people pay for when they get, okay? And it's not efficiently run. U.S. Postal Service workers earn more than workers at FedEx and UPS. Postage rates are not set by market forces. They're set by government mandates. The post office, believe it or not, is actually taking money from the general fund of the federal government to support itself indirectly. There are redundant mail routes. You get mail every day, even though you could just check your internet and for almost private services and actually save money. Also, the post office does not really have the option to reduce Saturday delivery. Legally, they're obligated to deliver. The post office general decided he was going to cut it off, and the politicians didn't bring it to the attorney general, which they could have done. So a federally mandated service is difficult to change when people want other services. Now, I brought up the point that most communication can be done over email. We have other services such as UPS, FedEx, and Airborne Express to hand dispatch delivery. If the postal service ends, the world will not come to an end. What happens if we bail them out? What happens if we continue to indirectly subsidize the cost of the post service? Basically, what we're essentially doing is we're taxing internet users, taxing the people who use the internet to receive information, to subsidize the cost of postal delivery. And I don't think as a society we want to discourage internet use. I think that has a negative impact on our society. I think that we should not tax the internet indirectly to provide postal service thing. We should recognize the value of new technology in the internet. We should recognize that a lot of the stuff the Postal Service does can be done by other people, and we should realize that we can save money and run a more efficient country by using Postal Service, by using alternatives to the Postal Service.
Outside, welcome up to the front, Dan McBride.
My fellow Marxists and comrades in arms, welcome. I'm glad you took time out of your busy schedule to come here to this very important meeting tonight. Richard, I know you're immersed in your pills. It must have been hard to swallow the message that I sent you to come to this meeting urgently. We have a couple of teachers here that are carrying the torch in our public schools. We even have a special guest from the Soviet Union, our agent. Any questions later on, she'll be glad to answer you. But what really prompted me to call this meeting was our undercover Marxist agent from the Tea Party right here in Thousand Oaks, Carolyn Gill. She informed me that the local Toastmasters Club was debating about privatizing the post office. We cannot have that. We just can't let that happen. Let me give you a couple of pertinent facts here. Our biggest ally in forging a socialist workers' paradise in America are the labor unions, right? 8 of the top 10 political contributors in this country are unions. Unions' political contributions exceed $1 billion every election cycle. Unions generate their revenues from the dues of their union members. There are over 522,000 postal workers. You do the math. Post office employees contribute dues of between $8 and $10 million a year. If the post office is allowed to privatize, we lose that money. Our political contributions will have been severely reduced. Our efforts to socialize America will have been slowed down. We can't let that happen. We just can't. Now, some of you, I understand, may have had a tendency to relax a little bit and take off some of the pressure because we have a Marxist in the White House. And the tendency is to relax a little bit. But we can't do that. We have a couple of agenda items that we have to fulfill during this 4-year cycle. Obamacare, we have to solidify Obamacare and get it to the point where we can nationalize it and get rid of these nasty profit-making insurance companies. And the gun issue. Of course, we can't go anywhere with guns in the hands of private citizens. So we need this money to keep electing politicians that will help us in our task of socializing America. We just cannot afford to lose that money if we privatize the post office. So I urge all of you to go back to your jobs and work to nip this thing in the bud. No private post office. Remember, the end justifies the means. No private post office.
You know, there is a reason why the price of stamps keeps going up. I didn't know how much a stamp was until Richard kind of told me. But it's because the cost of ammunition is increasing so much.
Yeah.
Oh, that's bad.
Stop firing off these bad jokes.
Please welcome on the rebuttal for Conside backup DJ.
I'm actually going to start by rebutting Michael, because I actually think that those jokes were really fun, and I want you to continue. And then I'm going to rebut something else. Mr. Ken Lay here made a comment about the pre-funding of retirement benefits under the Postal Service. I'm not Dan, Michael. We have to understand that as part of accounting rules in the United States, you have to pay for a worker's retirement at the same time you pay for the rest of their expenses. Because if we just continuously stop paying for retirement, every place would go bankrupt, because eventually you have to pay your retirement benefits. So as part of our national rules, we're required to pay for the retirement benefits associated with current postal employees. I think that's an essential thing, and although it looks like an accounting gimmick, it's actually critical to the functioning of our government that we prepay our future retirement expenses. So I think Michael's argument, Michael's argument with regards to the pre-funding retirement benefits causing accounting irregularities to the post office is very dangerous. Second of all, I want to talk about Michael's regards to comparing his job as a teacher versus a post office employee. Again, a teacher, you provide education. The post office is a service. You know, it's a very different thing for our society. I don't think it's a valid comparison to compare the roles and responsibilities of a teacher with the post office employee. Dan and I talked a lot about the political contributions of unions. People have power in this country. They have a right to have their opinions expressed. I think that that's very important. Now, I'm actually kind of taking the side of against what I want to say, but I'm trying to rebut my prior speaker. I think that people have a right to make contributions, and they have a right to make their opinions heard, regardless of where they stand on the spectrum. I was kind of taken aback by the last speech. I think you're subtly trying to say take the other side because you agree with it. And I want to encourage you to, even when you take a side you disagree with, argue vehemently for it because I feel it helps you grow as a person. Even when I disagree with something like performance-enhancing drugs or whatever, I like to take the opposite side just because it makes me like feel what it would be like to be someone in that respect.
Back the other pro side rebuttal, I mean con side rebuttal. And right.
Thank you once again. Jay, you missed my point. My point was that I was taking the side of the labor unions in defense of the post office. And believe you me, they are pro-postal. You can just get on the website, they are there. And they generate oodles and oodles of money. And having experience being in the union in the early 80s, I was in the plumbers union for a short time. And I'm telling you, it's Marxist. I belong to the plumbers union as part of the AFL-CIO. I got a monthly paper, and I'm telling you, you open it up, and you take at that time, they had a communist publication here, of People's World. The two were hand in glove, okay? It's a known fact that labor unions are pro-communist. So I was taking the stance of pro-post office because I was I was trying to mimic exactly what's happening with, that was my job, and I think I did a pretty good job at it.
So I think you've all heard that the Postal Service is going to probably eliminate Saturday delivery. One group has commented on that saying, we won this round. Said dogs everywhere. Also,
laughing at this joke, barking up a wrong tree.
Al Gore does suggest that you do use the internet, seeing that he is the inventor of the internet. Welcome back. Welcome up our next two speakers, or our last two speakers. So for the pro side, welcome Alan Mann.
A Toastmaster walks into a post office to mail a priority mail letter. And there's a line. And he waits. The line gets a little shorter. And he waits. And he waits. And just as he gets up to the desk the next customer, the attendant bends down, puts something at his or her station saying, gone to lunch. And no one takes the place of that postal worker. That is the state of customer service at the U.S. Postal Service. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. What we need at the U.S. Postal Service is better customer service. As a buyer, I use Federal Express and UPS on a daily basis to guarantee that the parts that are currently in England get to me overnight without worry. Even if I have something coming across country and the train that package on derails, I could go online and find out the status of my package, my critical package, and how many people receive critical mail or depend on mail from loved ones, or have important documents being mailed across the country. We need a way to improve the customer service of the U.S. Postal Service. And one way to do that is a new train of thought, a new way of running that organization. And if it means privatizing the post office, giving their employees a little incentive to work their 8-hour day, then in an incentive-based organization, then maybe that's what it's going to take. Now, it's been said here about, the greed of corporate executives. Well, that same greed even exists at the high levels of the current U.S. Postal Service. The predecessor to Patrick Donahoe, the current Postmaster General, received a retirement gift worth over $100,000. Not a bad little gift, just not a nice little keepsake. So, this kind of greed and nice corporate benefits for top executives also exists at the U.S. Postal Service. And there's also a little known fact. There are countries in the world whose main export, believe it or not, are stamps. Believe it or not. That's all they do. That their main exports aren't bananas or apples or mangoes. That the St. Vincent of Genovese Islands, that's their main export to the world is stamps of anybody who's famous, whether it be President Obama, some famous, I'm sure Michael Phelps has been on a few stamps, that kind of stuff. Maybe what we need is a little creativity at the U.S. Postal, of the people who are running the Postal Service to generate income, as opposed to, the regular methods of generating. Just a little more creativity. Now, people are afraid about losing Saturday service. Well, it wasn't too long ago, people received mail in most U.S. cities twice a day. So the world is not going to come to an end here in the United States if you do not receive your Netflix on Saturday afternoons.
Yeah,
You're just going to have to wait.
need it twice a week.
Okay? We need people who are willing to make hard decisions. And the current management of the U.S. Postal Service and the government of the United States is not willing to make that kind of those hard decisions, as we see every day on the news. So we need people, we need an organization, a privatized organization that is willing to make the tough decisions to run an efficient organization. Mr. Postmaster.
Side. Dan Murray. While in theory, the idea of privatizing the post office looks pretty attractive, in reality, there are some hitches in the process that I don't think are being addressed. Yes, we have a situation where, for instance, SpaceX down in Torrance privatized the business of reaching space and did a wonderful job and spent a ton of money doing it. That's one example. Then we have Solyndra, which in trying to change solar energy went broke. The central problem for this is when it comes to the post office. The post office is first and foremost an organization that is tantamount to a public trust. That is, the post office is charged with delivering letters and packages and exists to do that first, no matter what. Now you say, you wait in line at the post office. That's happened to me. You say, well, we might not have Saturday delivery. That's going to be a bit of a problem for some people. But the bottom line is that still, the U.S. Post Office has one customer, has one group it serves, and that is all of us. What does that have to do with privatization? If we take the U.S. Post Office and privatize the mail, whatever company wins the bid is going to be in a situation where they have two customers. People who want to receive mail
and people who have invested in that company. And if part and parcel of surviving as an organization is making sure that your investors are happy, it could mean that in many circumstances, mail delivery will not be what it should be. There are other real world problems. For instance, if we privatize mail, is there going to be one company that serves an area? 2 companies? 3 companies? Is it going to be a situation where you bid for which mail delivery system you buy and use for delivering your mail? Is that going to truly be competitive? We have a situation when it comes to public utilities. Public utilities don't have competition. They're regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. And the thing about it is, that's something that, given the circumstances, must remain so when it comes to the post office. Another thing about this situation, Dan McBride mentioned earlier tonight the business of junk mail. For those advertisers who depend on junk mail, what's going to happen if we have a private organization who can decide what they're going to charge for junk mail? Because there's only one market, and that is the company that serves our country in terms of junk mail. Now, junk mail is interesting because, I'll tell you something, I've been around marketing for 40 years plus. Junk mail, although everybody hates it, works. And there will be the possible loss of economic benefits if we end up giving one contract for mail to one organization who has to address the needs of the public and of their investors. So as attractive as it might be, privatizing mail delivery is just not a good idea. Mr. Joseph.
First class mail, that's kind of an oxymoron. I mean, what makes it first class anyway? You know, I could do a human speech on that, but that's another time. But welcome
Rebuttal?
our pro-side rebuttaler.
Fellow Toastmasters, welcome Jess and Dan. You brought up some very good points.
I
Let's
did.
let's talk about Solyndra. You forget that Solyndra was subsidized by the government, whereas SpaceX was not. Funny that SpaceX managed to get itself is on the brink of putting NASA out of business, while Solyndra, well, I think we've all sort of heard what happened to Solyndra. Now, junk mail. 200 years from now, there will be junk mail, whether it comes in the form of a hard paper letter, or what we personally know as spam. So junk mail is not going to go away. And maybe what's going to happen is, over a period of time, a privatization, one organization is going to be able, will find its niche market in serving the first-class mail market. Another privatized company will become efficient in junk mail, which again is going to be here for a long time. I hate to disappoint you, but junk mail is not going away. So Dan brought up some good points, but it's all a matter about customer service. And as I said before, and the only way to force employees to give customer service is an organization where there's incentive to serve the public. Mr. President.
rebuttal on Con's side, and, Alan. Thank you, Alan, Dan.
Ladies and gentlemen, has anybody looked at what has happened to the stock of FedEx in the last 12 months? Anybody? Anybody? Followed it for the last 12 months, ending today? FedEx's stock is going downhill faster than Sasquatch on snow skis. Why is that so? Couple of reasons. One thing is that people are looking at the cost of delivery. We have more delivery of packages now because we have the internet. And people are looking at their delivery options. You can choose between $8 and waiting a week, or $22 and waiting 2 days, or $30 and waiting a day. And people are getting smart about this. I mean, it used to be wonderful. FedEx used to say, when it absolutely positively has to be there overnight. That was before the internet. Now, it can absolutely positively be there instantly. Part of FedEx's problem is not only the fact that the package business is getting soft, but they have a fleet of jets that's aging so badly they're going to have to make a decision about replacing them. So you see, free enterprise and mail don't always go together, as I have said. In theory, it looks wonderful. In practice, nah. Mr. Turner.